We just are getting smacked back and forth in terms of policy changes. And so, you can cry wolf only so many times before the person who hears you cry wolf says, well, this is not a serious threat.
Now, President Trump has said he's dropped the threat of tariffs against European allies after saying he's agreed a framework for a deal on the future of Greenland and the Arctic region with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. There are a few details so far. CNBC asked the president about the deal.
It looks like we have pretty much a concept of a deal.
A deal of ownership, a deal...
Well, it's a little bit complex, but we'll explain it down the line. But the Secretary General of NATO and I and some other people were talking, and it's the kind of a deal that I wanted to be able to make.
Where does Denmark, did they weigh in on what they want, what they would agree to?
Well, I assume they did because he very much represents, he's a strong leader. Mark Rutte. And I assume he's been speaking to them. He's been speaking to all of them.
Are mineral rights involved? Is ownership involved? Did the Golden Dome sway people?
I don't want to say yet, but...
The Golden Dome was very compelling today when you talked about that.
Yeah, the Golden Dome, and they're going to be involved in the Golden Dome. And they're going to be involved in mineral rights, and so are we.
Well, during his main speech earlier, President Trump said he wanted American ownership of Greenland.
We pay for NATO, and we paid for many years until I came along. We paid for, in my opinion, 100% of NATO because they weren't paying their bills. And all we're asking for is to get Greenland, including right title and ownership, because you need the ownership to defend it. You can't defend it on a lease. Number one, legally it's not defensible that way, totally. And number two, psychologically, who the hell wants to defend?
So have President Trump's tariff threats worked? Let's talk to Harry Broadman, former US Assistant Trade Representative. He was also Chief of Staff of the President's Council of Economic Advisors under previous administrations. Good evening to you, Harry.
Good evening. Great to see you again.
Well, really good to talk to you. Many countries, including Britain, will be breathing a sigh of relief that these additional tariffs threatened for the 1st of February have apparently been dropped for the time being. Do you think that the president was ever serious about imposing them?
Well, to be blatantly honest, your guess is as good as mine. Sometimes Mr. Trump flags things just as sort of a smoke signal, and sometimes they may be figments of his imagination. We really don't know. And I don't mean to be rude, but I think we've all learned to understand this back and forth. It happens virtually all the time in the United States with respect to economic policy, but in other areas as well.
President Trump was talking in his main address today about his love of tariffs and how successful they've been. I mean, do you think they have been successful?
Well, it depends on what goals one is looking at. If you're looking at trying to promote economic growth, that's very clear it has not. It tends to raise prices for consumers in the country which is imposing the tariffs. It's obviously, created other problems in the world markets in which the United States is a competitor. But I think the biggest challenge that we face, not just the U.S. economy, but the world economy, is the uncertainty in Mr. Trump's economic conduct and his behavior. No one knows what took place today, at least no one that I know knows what took place today. We don't know whether, in fact, anything really did take place or not. But he does have a habit of putting down threats and then taking them back. And that's no way to run a country. It's certainly no way to run an economy.
Well, I mean, clearly what President Trump believes is that by threatening these tariffs and in some cases imposing them, even if they've then subsequently been lifted, that has given him a lot of leverage, that they are a weapon in his diplomatic bag, which has brought nations to heel. And I mean, he now clearly feels that with this framework arrangement, he's going to be able to get not just greater security in Greenland, but perhaps further rights on some of the minerals and the oils.
And he may well have negotiated something along those lines. That would be my guess in terms of what the substance of any discussions were. But I do think it's fairly unequivocal what tariffs do to an economy. And I think the notion or the hypothesis that they've worked, in quotes, because people have backed off, I think that's a premature calculation or conclusion. I think what the world markets and other competitors have learned is, we just are getting smacked back and forth in terms of policy changes. And so, you can cry wolf only so many times before the person who hears you cry wolf says, well, this is not a serious threat. Yes, he has imposed tariffs, and those that have been imposed, frankly, have not been good for the U.S. economy. You can just look at the stock market, you can look at interest rates, unemployment rates, and the like, and consumer sentiment. Over here, economic anxiety is quite palpable, whether you're in the investment community, whether you're in the job market or as a consumer. And when there's uncertainty, people don't know how to make intelligent economic decisions. And that can be the most corrosive element in promoting economic growth, constraining economic growth.
There was also, of course, huge uncertainty and concern here in the UK and other nations, including France and Germany and so on, that were facing this threat of tariffs. But the president of the United States was also facing a pretty serious threat of counter tariffs from the European Union, which suspended its EU-US deal. We had the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, who's been very, very careful in his language around President Trump, saying that he would not yield, that he would not back down in terms of his position on the future of Greenland because of the threat of tariffs. Do you think there is a sense in which perhaps President Trump realized that it might be counterproductive for him to actually impose these tariffs?
I'm not sure he's drawn that conclusion as clearly as I think most of us would like him to do. I think what he likes is getting behavior to change among different leaders, and to be very frank, I think getting respect that he's a tough guy on the block, and that he can sway public opinion, he can sway decisions by other countries' leaders. But I think you can do this only so long before these other leaders are going to say, well, this guy, cannot be taken seriously. But in the meantime, a lot of economic damage can be done on both sides of the ledger. It's not just in the U.S. economy. It's not just the economies on which the tariffs are going to be imposed. It's not good for global growth, and particularly because these tariffs have been focused among other advanced countries. Very, very few other than China, have been on, emerging markets in the global south. So, we're choking off growth in the countries which are stimulating growth and have been the engine of growth for decades. Again, putting aside China, which is a whole other battle, I think.
Well, yeah, just to talk about that one, because at one stage, President Trump imposed really huge punitive tariffs on China, but China then slapped matching ones back on US on the goods that the US was selling to China, didn't it? And that seemed to force the president to back down. So perhaps the robust stance from the Europeans worked.
I think so. I think if they took collective action, arm in arm, and said, yeah, if you don't do this, we're going to do this. I think the difference with China is obviously run by, one individual who, organizes and runs a command and control economy, and what he says goes. It's a country, obviously, that many other countries, including the US, the UK, and others, depend on heavily. So when they step up to the plate and they swing their bat, that tends to really, strike fear in other people's hearts. But I think unless there is bona fide collective action among other advanced countries, arm in arm, to say, you know what, the 10 of us have met together and we're going to impose tariffs, lock, stock, and barrel. that could have an effect on Trump. But we're not really talking policy, unfortunately, right? We're living in a world where it's threats and retaliations, and that kind of behavior really stilts, economic growth. It harms investment decision making, job hiring, and the like, and that is not a good sign. If you were a Martian looking down at what's going on in the global economy with the president of the United States, you sort of shake your head and go, what is going on here?
Harry Broadman, former US Assistant Trade Representative. Great to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.